In the vast expanse of the land of Uz, where the sun mercilessly scorched the golden plains, there lived a man named Job. His name echoed throughout the region, not just as a whisper of admiration, but as a roar of respect and reverence. Job was no ordinary man. He was, by all definitions of the time, a true billionaire of ancient times. Imagine, if you can, herds so vast that they stretched beyond the horizon, 7,000 sheep, their bleating creating a pastoral symphony that lulled the starry nights, 3,000 camels, their imposing silhouettes etched against the desert sky, carrying riches from distant lands, 500 yoke of oxen, their tireless work making the fertile land produce in abundance, and 500 female donkeys, their steady hooves transporting valuable goods along age-old trade routes. But Job's wealth went far beyond his herds. His family was numerous and prosperous, 7 sons and 3 daughters, all raised in opulence, but also in righteousness and fear of God. His house was a palace, not just in size and splendor, but in hospitality and generosity. The doors were always open for travelers, the needy, and all those seeking shelter or advice. Job was known not only for his material wealth but for his unparalleled wisdom and unwavering devotion to God. He was the respected patriarch, the just judge, the generous benefactor. His word was law, not by decree, but by merit. When Job spoke, kings listened. When he advised, wise men pondered. His influence extended far beyond the borders of Uz, reaching distant lands and royal courts. Every morning before the sun rose, Job would get up to offer sacrifices to God, not just for himself, but for each of his children. Perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts, he would say, his devotion a living lesson for all around him. This was Job's routine, day after day, year after year, a life of abundance blessed by God and lived in obedience to him. But what no one knew, not even Job, was that his life was about to change dramatically. In the celestial realms, a singular conversation was about to take place, a conversation that would test Job's faith to its most extreme limits. On a day like any other in heaven, when the angels presented themselves before the Lord, Satan also appeared among them. God, in his omniscience, asked Satan, "Where have you come from?" Satan, with a malicious gleam in his eyes, replied, "From roaming throughout the earth, going back and forth on it." It was then that God, with fatherly pride, mentioned Job. "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil." Satan, ever cynical, retorted with a question that would echo through the centuries. "Does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not put a hedge around him and his household and everything he has? You have blessed the work of his hands, so that his flocks and herds are spread throughout the land. But now stretch out your hand and strike everything he has, and he will surely curse you to your face." The challenge was set. God, confident in Job's integrity, allowed Satan to test his servant, with one condition: he could not harm Job physically. And so began Job's ordeal, a journey that would take him from the heights of prosperity to the depths of despair. On a single fateful day, messengers arrived in quick succession, each bringing news more devastating than the last. The first reported that the Sabaeans had attacked and stolen his oxen and donkeys, killing the servants. Before he could process this loss, another messenger arrived, announcing that fire from the sky had consumed his sheep and shepherds. A third informed him of an attack by the Chaldeans, who had taken all his camels and killed more servants. But the final blow, the cruelest of all, came with the last messenger. "Your sons and daughters were feasting in their oldest brother's house, when suddenly a mighty wind swept in from the desert and struck the 4 corners of the house. It collapsed on them, and they are all dead." In a matter of hours, Job went from billionaire to beggar. Everything he owned, everything he loved, was torn from him in the blink of an eye. His vast fortune, gone. His beloved children, dead. His faithful servants, murdered. The empire he had built over decades crumbled like a sandcastle before a relentless wave. In that moment of unimaginable anguish, when most men would have succumbed to despair or cursed the heavens, Job did something extraordinary. He got up, tore his robe in mourning, shaved his head in humility, and falling to the ground, worshipped God. His words, uttered in the midst of the deepest pain, would resound through the millennia as a testimony of unwavering faith. "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, may the name of the Lord be praised." But Job's ordeal was far from over. Satan, unsatisfied with the result of the first test, challenged God again, skin for skin. "A man will give all he has for his own life. But now stretch out your hand and strike his flesh and bones, and he will surely curse you to your face." God, once again confident in Job's integrity, allowed Satan to afflict him physically, with the condition of sparing his life. Thus, Job was struck with painful sores from the soles of his feet to the crown of his head. Sitting among the ashes, scraping his wounds with a piece of broken pottery, Job became the living image of human suffering. His wife, seeing him in that deplorable state, asked bitterly, "Are you still maintaining your integrity? Curse God and die." But Job, in his unwavering wisdom and faith, replied, "You are talking like a foolish woman. Shall we accept good from God, and not trouble?" In all this suffering, Job did not sin in what he said. The news of Job's misfortunes spread quickly. 3 of his friends, Eliphaz, Bildad and Zophar, came to comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they barely recognized him. They wept aloud, tore their robes, and threw dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how terrible his suffering was. It was after this period of silence that Job finally opened his mouth to lament. His words, laden with anguish and despair, were a cry of pain that echoed the human condition in its most vulnerable state. "May the day of my birth perish, and the night that said, 'A boy is conceived.' That day, may it turn to darkness, may God above not care about it, may no light shine on it. Why did I not perish at birth, and die as I came from the womb?" Job's lament initiated a series of philosophical and theological dialogues with his friends, who tried to find an explanation for his suffering. Eliphaz, Bildad and Zophar, each in their own way, argued that Job's suffering must be the result of some hidden sin. After all, in their limited view of the world, they believed that God always rewards the righteous and punishes the wicked. But Job, in his integrity, vehemently rejected this simplistic explanation. He knew in his heart that he had committed no sin that justified such punishment. His responses to his friends are some of the most poetic and profound passages in ancient literature, exploring fundamental questions about the nature of suffering, divine justice, and the purpose of human existence. "If I justify myself, my own mouth would condemn me. If I claim to be blameless, it would prove me perverse. Although I am blameless, I have no concern for myself. I despise my own life. It is all the same. That is why I say, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked." Job's frustration grew as his friends insisted on their simplistic theories. He longed for an audience with God, a chance to present his case directly to the Creator. "If only I knew where to find him, if only I could go to his dwelling. I would state my case before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would find out what he would answer me, and consider what he would say to me." As the debate continued, a fourth friend, Elihu, who had remained silent until then because he was younger, decided to intervene. Elihu criticized both Job and his 3 friends, offering a different perspective on suffering. He argued that suffering is not always a punishment, but can be a means by which God disciplines and teaches humans. Finally, after 37 chapters of intense debates and anguished laments, God answered Job. But the divine response did not come in the form Job expected. Instead of explanations or justifications, God responded with a series of rhetorical questions that highlighted the vastness of his wisdom and power compared to limited human understanding. "Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me, if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from the womb? Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? Can you loosen Orion's belt?" Faced with this overwhelming demonstration of divine power and wisdom, Job finally understood the true nature of his situation. He realized that no matter how wise and righteous he was, his understanding of the universe and God's purposes was infinitely limited. In an act of profound humility and repentance, Job responded, "I know that you can do all things. No purpose of yours can be thwarted." You asked, "Who is this that obscures my plans without knowledge?" Surely I spoke of things I did not understand, things too wonderful for me to know. My ears had heard of you, but now my eyes have seen you. Therefore I despise myself and repent in dust and ashes. This confession marked the turning point in Job's story. God, satisfied with Job's response, rebuked the 3 friends for not having spoken the truth about him, as Job had done. He instructed them to offer sacrifices and asked Job to pray for them. What happened next was nothing short of miraculous. God restored Job's fortune, giving him twice as much as he had before. All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble the Lord had brought on him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring. The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen and 1,000 donkeys. He also had 7 sons and 3 daughters, considered the most beautiful women in all the land. Job lived for 140 more years, seeing his children and his children's children to the 4th generation. Job's story is much more than a tale of loss and restoration. It's a profound exploration of the nature of suffering, faith, and the relationship between God and humanity. Through Job, we are invited to contemplate some of the most fundamental questions of existence. 1. Why do good people suffer? 2. What is the purpose of suffering? 3. How should we respond when we face inexplicable tragedies? 4. What should our attitude be towards God when we don't understand His ways? Job's journey teaches us several valuable lessons. 1. True faith persists even in the most adverse circumstances. 2. Our understanding of the universe and God's purposes is limited. 3. Suffering is not always a punishment for sin. 4. God is present and in control, even when we cannot see or understand His purposes. 5. Humility before God is more important than having all the answers. 6. Restoration and blessing can come after periods of intense trial. Job's story continues to resonate with people of all ages and cultures because it touches on something deeply human: our struggle to find meaning in suffering and to maintain faith in the face of seemingly unjust adversity. It's a narrative that challenges our preconceived notions about justice, merit, and the nature of God. As we examine Job's story more deeply, we discover additional layers of meaning and lessons that are often overlooked. 1. The story of Job is, in essence, an exploration of theodicy, the attempt to reconcile the existence of an all-powerful and benevolent God with the reality of evil and suffering in the world. The arguments of Job and his friends represent different philosophical approaches to this problem. While his friends defend a simplistic view of cause and effect, sin leads to suffering, Job insists on his innocence, challenging this logic. 2. God's response, or rather, the non-response in terms of direct explanation, suggests that some questions are beyond human comprehension. This is not an evasion, but an acknowledgement of the vastness of divine wisdom compared to our limited perspective. 3. Satan's challenge to God raises a provocative question: are people faithful to God only because of the blessings they receive? Job's integrity under extreme pressure demonstrates that true faith is not a transaction, but a relationship grounded in trust and reverence, regardless of external circumstances. 4. Job's passionate laments teach us that expressing pain, anger, and confusion before God is not sin. On the contrary, it's a form of radical honesty in faith. Job's willingness to question God, while refusing to abandon his faith, offers a powerful model of how to deal with suffering. 5. The well-intentioned but ultimately harmful attempts of Job's friends to explain his suffering remind us of the importance of genuine empathy. Sometimes, silent presence is more comforting than hasty words. This part of the story teaches us to be careful when trying to explain others' suffering and the importance of simply being present with those who suffer. 6. Although Job's suffering was not sent by God as punishment, the experience profoundly transformed him. His final statement, "My ears had heard of you but now my eyes have seen you," suggests a deeper and more intimate understanding of God that came through his trial. This doesn't justify suffering, but illustrates how we can grow through difficult experiences. 7. The restoration of Job's fortune at the end of the story is often misinterpreted as a reward for his faithfulness. However, a closer reading suggests that it's more a demonstration of God's grace and generosity than a payment for services rendered. This challenges our tendency to see the relationship with God in transactional terms. 8. The initial conversation between God and Satan offers an intriguing glimpse behind the spiritual scenes. It suggests that there are forces at play in the universe beyond our immediate perception, and that free will, both human and angelic, plays a significant role in the events that unfold in our lives. 9. Despite their flaws, Job's friends demonstrate the value of community in times of crisis. They traveled from afar and sat with Job in silence for 7 days. This act of solidarity, even if followed by misguided advice, highlights the importance of community support during suffering. 10. An often forgotten aspect of the story is how God rehabilitates Job's reputation before his community. By instructing the friends to seek Job's intercession, God publicly restores Job's status as a righteous and favored man. This underscores the importance of reputation in ancient culture and how God cares not only about our spiritual condition but also our social standing. 11. Job's restoration, including the birth of new children, does not erase the loss of his previous children. This reminds us that healing and restoration don't always mean a return to the previous state, but can involve a new reality that incorporates both loss and renewed blessing. Job's narrative transcends its origin in the Old Testament and has influenced literature, philosophy, psychology, and theology throughout the centuries. In literature, writers such as Fyodor Dostoevsky, Franz Kafka, and Robert Frost explored Jobian themes in their works, reflecting on the nature of suffering and the search for meaning in an apparently indifferent universe. In philosophy, thinkers like Immanuel Kant and Soren Kierkegaard deeply engaged with the questions raised in the Book of Job, using them as a starting point for explorations of ethics, faith, and the nature of human existence. In psychology, The concept of the Job effect in modern psychology refers to the human tendency to blame victims for their own misfortune, echoing the behavior of Job's friends. In theology, the Book of Job has been central to theological discussions about the problem of evil, the suffering of the innocent, and the nature of divine sovereignty. It has influenced the development of various theodicies and pastoral approaches to dealing with suffering. In popular culture, references to Job appear in numerous forms of modern media, from songs and movies to television shows, demonstrating the continued relevance and power of his story. In a world marked by global pandemics, natural disasters, geopolitical conflicts, and personal crises, Job's story offers a powerful paradigm for facing inexplicable suffering. 1. Resilience. Job models a resilience that doesn't deny the reality of pain but persists in integrity and faith. 2. Honest questioning. Job's willingness to question God encourages a faith that isn't afraid to ask difficult questions or express doubts. 3. Intellectual humility. God's response to Job reminds us of the limits of our understanding, promoting an intellectual humility necessary in an era of polarization and absolute certainties. 4. Compassion. The failures of Job's friends teach us to approach others' suffering with genuine empathy, rather than judgment or simplistic explanations. 5. Hope. Job's eventual restoration offers hope that, although suffering may be prolonged and intense, it is not the final word. 6. Cosmic perspective. The glimpse into the heavenly backstage reminds us to consider a broader perspective in our struggles, recognizing that there may be more at stake than we can immediately see. 7. Intrinsic value. God's affirmation of Job's worth, regardless of his circumstances, reminds us of our intrinsic value beyond our possessions or status. Job's journey, from billionaire to beggar and back to prosperity, is much more than a story of loss and restoration. It's an invitation to contemplate the deepest questions of human existence: the meaning of suffering, the nature of faith, the limits of human wisdom, and the character of God. In a world where success is often measured in material terms and suffering is often seen as a personal failure, Job's story offers a radically different perspective. It challenges us to find meaning and purpose beyond external circumstances, to maintain integrity in the face of adversity, and to trust in a wisdom greater than our own limited understanding. The narrative of Job, with its raw poetry, philosophical dialogues, and theophanic climax, continues to capture the imagination and challenge the intellect of generation after generation. It is a testimony to the enduring power of great stories to illuminate the deepest truths of the human condition. May Job's story continue to inspire, comfort, and challenge those who find themselves in their own valleys of shadow and death, reminding us that even in the darkest circumstances, there is the possibility of deeper understanding, more mature faith, and eventual restoration.